Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It was one of those quiet mornings when the air felt heavy with something unsaid. The sunlight was barely slipping through the curtains, touching the edge of the unmade bed, and for a second, I thought everything was normal again. But then his face flashed in my mind, his eyes from that night, the way he looked at me as if words no longer existed between us. Since that moment, I haven't been able to think straight. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's something else entirely. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. He had come home unexpectedly, after months away, taller, older, different somehow. The boy I once saw as my stepson had become a man overnight, and I wasn't prepared for how much that would shake me. We talked late into the evening, laughing like we used to when things were simple, when I could still see him as the kid who'd spill cereal on the counter and run off before cleaning it up. But as the clock pushed past midnight, something in the air shifted. Every glance lingered too long. Every silence felt too deep. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. I wanted to move past it, to act like nothing happened. But then, as I was changing, the door creaked open. I didn't even have time to turn around before I saw him standing there, his expression unreadable, a mixture of surprise and something else. I could have told him to leave. I should have. But I didn't. From that second on, everything changed between us. The space felt charged, and neither of us knew what to say. The unspoken tension grew heavier with each heartbeat. Was it wrong to feel drawn to someone who'd once been part of your family's ordinary life? Or was it just the loneliness finally catching up, two people who understood each other too well, standing on the edge of something they both feared? Every time I close my eyes, I replay that moment, the way he stepped closer, the hesitation in his voice, the way the world seemed to stop around us. There are things that should never happen, but sometimes emotions don't listen to reason. That morning keeps echoing in my head, reminding me of how quickly boundaries can blur when hearts start to wander. Do you think people can truly control what they feel, or is it just destiny pulling two lives into one line, no matter how complicated it gets? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in that moment? Because that morning, that single moment, didn't end the way I thought it would. And even now, when I walk past his door, I still hear the silence that followed. The kind that speaks louder than words. Stay tuned for the next part, because what happened after that day changed everything between us, in ways neither of us could ever take back. The rest of that day moved slower than usual. Every sound in the house felt louder, the ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind brushing against the curtains. I tried to keep myself busy, washing dishes that were already clean, folding laundry that didn't need folding, but my mind wouldn't stop wandering back to that moment. The look in his eyes stayed with me. It wasn't just surprise, it was confusion, curiosity, something unspoken that neither of us was ready to face. He didn't bring it up, not even once. We acted normal, almost too normal, like two people pretending they hadn't crossed an invisible line. But every time we passed each other in the hallway, there was this quiet awareness. A small pause before one of us looked away. He'd say good morning in a softer tone now, and I'd find myself noticing little things I hadn't before, the way he smiled when he was trying to hide a thought, the way his voice deepened when he spoke. That evening, I found him sitting outside on the porch, watching the sunset. It was the same spot his father used to sit after long days, quiet and thoughtful. I hesitated before stepping out, unsure if I should join him. But something in his expression made me stay. We talked about simple things at first, the weather, his work, how much the neighborhood had changed. Slowly, the conversation drifted toward the past, toward memories we both shared. He told me how hard it was growing up without feeling truly at home, how he'd always felt caught between two worlds. I listened quietly, realizing how much I didn't know about what he carried inside. Somewhere in that quiet space between words, I saw him differently, not just as the boy who had once called me stepmom, but as someone searching for the same piece I'd been missing. When the sky turned darker, I noticed how close we were sitting. I could feel the warmth of him beside me, the soft rhythm of his breathing mixing with the night air. For a moment, I almost said something I probably shouldn't. But instead, I looked away and asked if he wanted tea. He smiled, that same gentle smile that always made it harder to think clearly, and nodded. Inside, while boiling the water, I caught myself wondering when everything had changed. Was it that night, or had it been building quietly over the years, hidden beneath routine and distance? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that something had shifted between us, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the feeling was still there. As the kettle whistled, I heard his footsteps behind me. My heart skipped, but when I turned around, he only said he wanted to help. He reached for a mug, his hand brushing mine for the briefest second, and I froze. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us said more than words could. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear his quiet laugh echoing from the living room. It was strange, comforting and unsettling at the same time. I knew I should put distance between us, remind myself of what's right and what's not. But part of me didn't want to. Part of me wanted to stay in that uncertain space, where everything felt both wrong and completely real. The next few days passed with a strange rhythm, like we were both quietly waiting for something neither of us wanted to admit. The house felt smaller, the air heavier. Every shared space, a hallway, the kitchen, the living room, seemed to hold a kind of unspoken question between us. He had started helping me more around the house, fixing small things that didn't even need fixing, staying close but never too close. It was his way of being near without crossing the line we both silently understood. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard, repairing an old wooden chair that had been broken for years. His sleeves were rolled up, and sunlight caught the edge of his hair. I stood by the doorway watching him, remembering the boy who used to run through that same yard chasing the dog. Now he looked like someone else entirely, more sure, more distant. When he noticed me, he smiled faintly and asked if I wanted to help. I said yes, even though I knew I wouldn't be much help. I just wanted to stay there, to be part of that quiet moment that somehow felt safe and complicated at the same time. As we worked side by side, our conversation drifted again to the past. He mentioned how his father used to promise to fix that chair but never did. There was no bitterness in his tone, only a kind of quiet acceptance. I felt something tighten inside me. His father's absence had left holes in both our lives, different ones, but deep just the same. Maybe that's why our connection felt heavier now. It wasn't just attraction, it was something born out of loneliness and shared silence. Later that evening, I tried calling a friend just to distract myself, but the conversation felt distant. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily my thoughts kept returning to him. It scared me a little. I knew how others would see it, how wrong it might seem if anyone knew. But inside this house, with just the two of us, the outside world felt far away. That night, during dinner, he told me he might not stay for long, that he was thinking of moving to another city for work. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. I forced a small smile and said that it sounded like a good opportunity. But something in me sank. I didn't want him to leave, and that realization hit harder than I expected. After dinner, he went to his room, and I sat alone in the living room, staring at the quiet glow of the lamp. The thought of him walking away, after everything that was left unsaid, felt heavier than it should. I wondered if it was better this way, to let him go before either of us said something we couldn't take back. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table. Just a small piece of paper with his handwriting, "Went for a walk. Don't wait up if I'm late." I folded it carefully, not knowing why it made my chest tighten. The hours passed, and when I finally heard the door open that evening, I looked up expecting everything to feel normal again. But something in his expression told me it wouldn't be. He stood there, quiet, eyes unreadable, as if he had made a decision. The silence stretched, and I could almost hear my heartbeat echo in the room. What he said next would change everything, of that I was sure. What do you think he's about to say? Should she stop him before he leaves, or let him walk away to avoid more pain? Comment below. I'd love to know what you'd do if you stood by the doorway for a long moment before speaking, the sound of rain beginning to fall softly outside. His eyes looked tired, as if he hadn't slept all night. I waited, unsure if I should break the silence first. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, but it carried something heavy underneath. He said he had made up his mind about leaving. He needed time away, time to think. I nodded, pretending to understand, even though every word felt like a quiet goodbye. My hands trembled slightly as I tried to act calm, but inside, everything was unraveling. I wanted to tell him not to go, to say that things would be different, that we could start over somehow. But the words stayed trapped in my throat. The storm outside grew louder, wind brushing against the windows as thunder rolled across the sky. He walked to the window and stared out, lost in thought. I could see the struggle on his face, the kind of conflict that doesn't have an easy answer. He turned slightly toward me, as if about to say something, but stopped. His silence said more than words ever could. That night, the power went out. The entire house fell into darkness except for the faint light of a candle flickering on the table. We both reached for it at the same time, our hands brushing once again. It was such a small thing, but it made everything inside me freeze. Neither of us pulled away right away. There was something in that moment, a quiet tension, an invisible thread that neither of us dared to break. We sat in the candlelight, the room filled with shadows and unsaid feelings. He asked if I ever thought about what might have been different if life had taken another path. I didn't answer right away. I just watched the candle flame, wondering if some questions were better left unanswered. The air between us felt charged, almost too still. I could feel my heart pounding, the uncertainty, the fear, the strange warmth that had no place here. I knew we were standing at a line that could not be crossed, but somehow it felt like we were already too close to it. Then, without warning, lightning flashed outside, lighting up the room in an instant. In that brief light, I saw the look in his eyes, raw, conflicted, real. He whispered something I almost didn't catch, something that made the world go quiet for a heartbeat. I didn't know what to say. My chest felt heavy with words I couldn't speak. The rain kept falling, harder now, echoing against the windows. The candle flickered low, and I realized that whatever happened next would change everything forever. Should she stop him from leaving? Or let fate take its course? Tell me what you think in the comments, because the next part will finally reveal what choice she makes when morning comes. Air in her place. The rain continued through the night, steady and unrelenting, as if the sky itself refused to let go. I didn't sleep. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the rustle of the curtains, kept pulling me back to that moment when he whispered something I still wasn't sure I heard right. By morning, the world outside was drenched in gray, but inside, the silence felt even heavier. I half expected him to be gone when I walked into the kitchen, his bags by the door, a note on the counter. But instead, he was sitting there, staring into a cold cup of coffee. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes. Calm, but distant. He said he'd made a decision, but not the one I thought. He wasn't leaving just yet. He said he wanted to fix what was broken before he went. I didn't know what he meant exactly, but part of me was relieved just to hear he'd stay a little longer. The other part was terrified that staying meant facing everything we'd both been trying to avoid. The day passed slowly. We barely spoke, but the silence wasn't empty anymore, it was full of everything left unsaid. That evening, the power finally came back, and as the lights flickered on, I saw a letter on the table that hadn't been there before. It was from his father. I hadn't seen that handwriting in years. The letter must have been tucked away in the old drawer he had been cleaning the other day. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't long, just a few lines written before he passed, but the words changed everything. He wrote about regret, about how he knew he had kept secrets, things that would someday come to light. My eyes froze on one line that didn't make sense. If he ever finds out the truth, tell him I did what I thought was best for everyone. I looked up at him, confused. He was watching me, his face pale, his jaw tight. "You knew about this?" I asked quietly. He nodded. He said he found the letter days ago but didn't know how to tell me. There was something else too, something he hadn't said yet. He hesitated, then admitted that his father had told him a few months before he died that there were things about our family no one had ever spoken of, connections that blurred lines we thought were clear. My heart pounded. For the first time, I wasn't sure if what we were feeling was something that should have existed at all. Everything suddenly felt uncertain, our past, our bond, even the memories I had held on to for years. I couldn't tell if what I felt was real or built on a truth I didn't yet know. He looked at me then, eyes full of something raw and desperate, and said he needed answers before he could walk away. I wanted to tell him to stop, to let it go, but part of me knew we couldn't move forward without facing whatever his father had hidden. The storm outside had quieted, but the air inside the house was thick with tension. The letter lay open between us, fragile and powerful all at once. I didn't know where the truth would lead, but it felt like we were standing at the edge of something far bigger than either of us expected. What do you think the letter meant? Was his father hiding a secret that could change everything? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the next part will uncover what that secret really is. That night, neither of us could sit still. The letter sat on the table like a shadow we couldn't ignore. Finally, he said he needed to know what his father meant. There was only one place we could look, the old study upstairs, the one that had been locked for years. I hadn't stepped inside since the funeral. The key still hung behind the picture frame, right where his father had left it. When we opened the door, the air inside was cold and stale, heavy with dust and memory. Boxes were stacked in every corner, filled with papers, old photographs, and notebooks. We searched in silence, the floor creaking under each careful step. Then, inside an old folder marked with his father's initials, we found it, a set of letters tied with a ribbon. Some were written to me, others to someone I didn't know. And one, dated years before we ever met, held the truth neither of us was ready for. His father had written about a child, one he had never claimed publicly. The words blurred as I read them. It wasn't him. It wasn't my stepson. It was someone else. Someone his father had kept secret from everyone, including me. The letter explained how that hidden truth had haunted him for years, how he'd tried to protect both families by never speaking of it. I felt the air leave my chest. The fear that had been building for days slowly shifted into something else, relief mixed with disbelief. The boundaries we thought we'd crossed, the guilt that had hung over us, wasn't built on what we'd feared. We weren't bound by the secret his father hinted at. But the damage of silence, of years of not knowing, had already taken its toll. He sat down on the edge of the desk, running his hands through his hair, eyes closed. All this time, he whispered, he made us feel like something was wrong, when it wasn't. His voice broke slightly, not from sadness, but from the weight lifting after so long. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out, to say that maybe now things could finally be simple, but before I could speak, he pulled out one last folded note from the same box. It wasn't from his father. It was from his mother, written in a softer hand. It said, "He didn't tell you everything. Some truths are hidden to protect love, not destroy it." We looked at each other, confused and shaken. It was a twist we didn't see coming, proof that even in trying to protect us, the past had left more questions than answers. The house felt different that night, lighter, but not settled. The storm outside had passed, but inside, a new storm was just beginning. What do you think she meant by that last note? Was there another secret waiting to be uncovered, or had the truth already changed everything? Tell me what you think below, because what comes next might not be what anyone expects. The morning after finding that final note, the house felt still, almost peaceful for the first time in weeks. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, landing on the table where the letters still lay. Neither of us spoke for a long while. There were no more secrets to chase, only the quiet truth of what remained between us. The mystery of his father's words had been solved, but the emotional weight of everything we'd uncovered still lingered. He sat across from me, holding the last note again, reading it over and over as if he was trying to find a hidden message between the lines. Finally, he looked up and said softly, "I think she meant love doesn't need to make sense." Maybe that's what they were both trying to protect. His voice was calm now, steadier than it had been in days. There was a gentleness in the way he said it, as if he had finally made peace with the past. I nodded, feeling something loosen in my chest. For the first time, the guilt that had clouded everything seemed to fade. We weren't tied by secrets anymore. What connected us now was choice, the decision to move forward, to leave the past behind and build something honest, no matter how uncertain the future might be. That evening, we packed the letters away in a wooden box and placed it back in the study. It didn't feel like we were hiding the past this time, it felt like we were closing a chapter that had needed an ending. Outside, the sky was clear, the first stars beginning to show. The storm had passed completely. Before he left that night for his walk, he stopped by the door and smiled. "Maybe when I come back, we can start fresh," he said quietly. I smiled back, unsure if I wanted him to stay or to go, but certain that whatever happened next, we'd both be okay. Sometimes love isn't about possession or control, it's about understanding, timing, and the courage to let things unfold naturally. Days later, when I stood on the porch watching the sunrise, I realized how much had changed. The silence between us no longer felt heavy. It was filled with possibility. We had faced the truth, lost pieces of ourselves along the way, and somehow found a way back to peace. The story that began with confusion and longing ended with clarity and quiet acceptance. Not all love stories end in grand gestures, some end in stillness, in understanding, in finally letting go of what once held you back. How do you feel about how their story ended? Do you think they'll find their way back to each other, or was this the ending they both needed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to see a sequel, let me know, maybe their story isn't over just yet. Summary: a quiet house, a hidden letter, and two hearts caught between the past and what could be. The morning after that night with my stepson still plays in my mind, unfolds a story of forbidden feelings, old family secrets, and the power of truth to heal what was once broken. As the storm clears, what remains is not guilt, but the realization that love, in its truest form, can exist even after the pain of misunderstanding.